It begins with the fact that my boss called me from LA and said, George Harrison is coming to Toronto to play his concert. And we have signed George, which I knew, for Dark Horse Records to distribute his label. We want you to be the first representative of our promotion department, since you're our national man, to fly to Toronto and meet and greet George Harrison from all of us and report back to us on Monday how it went. I said, fine. So I get on a plane, I fly to the hotel, I walk in, check in, take my bag, get my room, I start unpacking all of my stuff. There's a knock on the door and it's Pat Luce. And Pat Luce was our very cranky publicity woman who used to work for Bill Graham. She knew what she was doing. So she walked in the room and looked around. She said, what are you doing here? Just like that. I said, well, I'm here because Harold, my boss, called me and told me that Herb and Jerry want me here to greet George, since this is his first show and we represent his label, Dark Horse. And I'm supposed to say hello to him from everybody. She said, well, I just want you to know that his manager, Dennis, has told me that he's not talking to anyone except Herb and Jerry. I said, oh. So as I was unpacking, I started packing. I started taking I remember I pulled out the drawer, I took the sweater, whatever it was, I put them back in my suitcase, and she said, now what are you doing? I said, I'm packing to go back to New York. And when I get back there, and they ask me, when LA calls me tomorrow and asks me how the show was, I'm going to say, I don't know. I couldn't meet George because Pat Luce told me that I couldn't meet him. She went, you son of a bitch. And she left the room. And I'm just sitting there all by myself, like. And all of a sudden she comes back, she says, all right, follow me. And she walks down the hallway and she opens this door, and it's a gigantic conference room. And on the wall I noticed there's this also gigantic picture of Sgt. Pepper's album cover. Humongous. And she walks out and slams the door. And I'm just standing there with my back to this door. All of a sudden, across the way, another door opens up and in walks George Harrison. First, oh my God, it was like, oh, and he walks over and he goes, hello, I'm George. I said, hello, George, I'm Rich. And I'm like, and he said, so, how do you like Toronto? I said, I don't know, I just got here. And he said, you don't live here? I said, no, George, I'm your national promotion man from A&M Records. And I'm here to represent LA and New York and the country and welcoming you to our label. Richie's a national man, he says, and he throws his arm around me. And he takes me to the Sgt. Pepper recreation on the wall, and he starts telling me how all of these people on the album cover, what they meant to the Beatles. Wow. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to remember any of this. I wish I had taken, because it's just so, I mean, I'm meeting a Beatle. So anyway, he finishes doing that and he says, I'm going to see you tonight at the concert. And I said, absolutely. He said, fine. And he left. My heart's pounding. I go back to my room and I call my friend Tosca, who was a publicist, very, very acknowledged publicist in Toronto. And she was the one that, when we were on a Festival Express train all the way across Canada, she was the one that signed us in and made sure we knew what we're doing and so forth and so on. So I called her up and I said, you got to come here. We're going to see George Harrison today. She goes, oh my God, I was hoping I could get there. I didn't know how. I said, you're coming with me. So she comes to the hotel. We drive over to the Maple Leaf Gardens. We have all access parking. We pull in. Right there, sir. We get out, the guy says, there's the stage door, open that and you'll be backstage. I go with Tosca and open the door, and I look up, and George is leaning on the very back of the stage, and Ravi Shankar, and I used to call them the Shankarettes, they're all doing their thing, and he's like this, and all of a sudden he turns around and he goes, and I don't do anything, I'm just standing watching it, and Tosca says, he's waving at you. Wave back at him. And I said, how do you know he's waving at me? She said, Rich, we opened the door and the light's behind you, he sees your hair. So I wave back. He runs off the stage, down the stairs, runs over. Hello, Rich, gives me a hug. I said, George, this is Tosca. Hello, Tosca, gives her a hug. I'll see you after the show. And he runs back up. After the first set, we're ushered to the backstage area where the dressing rooms are. And now there's tons of people there. There's all the Canadians. I know a lot of the Canadian people, A&M people, and I hear them going, A. And I remember saying, what the hell are you guys all A-ing? What's A-ing about? And they said, Bob Dylan is here. I said, whoa. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, I just met George Harrison a few hours ago, and now there's Bob Dylan. But what could anybody say to Bob Dylan? And then I started thinking, wait a minute. Bob lives in Woodstock. Leslie West lives in Woodstock. I used to stay at Leslie West's house. I became really good friends with Bob Dylan's bass player, Rick Danko. And I lost my phone book with Rick and Elizabeth's address in it. So I took out my A&M card and I wrote, Dear Rick and Elizabeth, I'm sorry I didn't call you when you were in LA. And I was there. But I lost my phone book. Please give me your stats. So as Dylan is walking by, no one's talking to him, and he's with Jim Keltner, one of the drummers in the band, in Tom Scott's big band. And as he's walking, I couldn't believe it. I went, Bob? And he turned around, he had these little granny glasses, those little dark sunglasses, he and Keltner both. And he walks over and he walks up to me and he goes, yeah? And I did a speed rap. I said, Bob, you know, Lick and Elizabeth and lots of things, A&M, and I hand it to him. And he takes his glasses and he goes like, so let me get this straight, he said. You want me to give this, and then all the time, there's people flashing, taking pictures of us, because I'm the only one that's talking to this guy. So he says, you want me to give this to Rick and Elizabeth because you lost your phone book? I said, yeah. He goes, okay. And he puts it in his pocket and he walks off. Now, we move over a little bit because he's standing right in front of George's dressing room. Obviously, he wants to be invited into George's dressing room when George decides it's time to invite the superstars in. And we're standing right next to him. All of a sudden, Tosca says to me, he's standing right next to you. You want to say anything else to him? I said, I think that's about all I could. I mean, what else can you say to him? And I look at him, and he's got a push broom, like that the janitor has, and he's sweeping up. He's like doing this, and Jim Keltner's laughing and says, "Hey, you missed the spot." He's like, "Yeah, I'll get right to it," and he's doing this. So he puts the broom down. So then he starts, and he looks at me. He sees my leather jacket on, and I had a Who patch on my leather jacket. And he comes over and he taps me. He says, "Was that a good show?" And I said, "It was an incredible show." But I said, "You're talking to." I traveled with them in 1970 on the whole American Who tour. They're my favorite band. I've never heard a band that was as good as the Who. He said, "Yeah, I was out of town. I missed that show. I'm really sorry I missed that." I said, "But speaking of great shows at Madison Square Garden, I saw you at Madison Square Garden. I brought my son. It was incredible." And that's when he got really serious. And he took his glasses down like this and he said, "Yeah? Why?" Oh, wow, you just can't socially BS with this guy. I said, "Why?" "Well, I said, Allen Ginsberg was sitting over here, Joni Mitchell was sitting over here. We were in the 5th or 7th row with my son. And I said, everywhere surrounded us were famous musicians. That was exciting in itself, just to be in that atmosphere. And then you came out, and I said, I thought somehow, I don't know why, but you were going to be laid back. I said, you came out like a fullback. You had on a white shirt, black jeans, black boots, and then Rick Danko and Robbie Robertson and the band, they were like kicking ass behind you. I said, it was incredible. And he went, yeah, it was pretty good. I said, yes. And then I made the mistake of saying, even my son liked you. What'd he like about it? Oh boy, I said, Jesus. I said, well, you know, when I used to play your music at home, my son would say, Dad, that guy can't sing. Take that off. His voice is horrible. I said, but when he saw you singing,
It's all right, Ma.
It's all right, Ma. It's only me and I'm bleeding. I said, that struck him so deeply that he went and he wrote an essay about it, and he went to school and he read it to his teacher, and his teacher loved it so much, she made him go to each class and recite what he had written again. And Bob Dylan said to me, you know what I like about that story? I said, what's that? He said, that means my songs are going on to a new generation. So, after the concert, we all go back to the same room that this all started in, where George walked in. And now the room's completely changed. There's all kinds of people, the band's there, there's caterers, and Bob Dylan is kind of reclining on this lounge where he's like half sitting, half laying. And he, as we walk in and we're kind of getting our bearings and going, where are we supposed to go with all these famous people? Dylan goes like this to me. So Tusk and I, we walk over to him and he says, sit down. We couldn't believe it, so we sit next to him. We're sitting there and people are coming up. Bob, the musicians, Bob, is there anything we can get you? Bob, would you like a drink? And if for anybody that ever saw the Rolling Thunder review, they'll realize how people wouldn't dare even talk to him. People around him. Some of the musicians said, I played the whole tour with him, he never talked to me. So here he's saying, come sit down. We sit down. A guy comes over and says, would you care for a drink? And he says, ask them. So we order a drink. And as we're sitting there, he taps me like this. And I look over and he hands me a joint. It's like, geez. So I take a nice hit off the joint. And now I don't know, etiquette-wise, I should give it to Tosca. But this is Bob Dylan, it's his joint, so I kind of go like this, and he goes, yeah. And we started smoking this joint. That was just something very, very, very special.